looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. The father-in-law looking over my shoulder. So I'm on the phone. You should be right to go. So where's my questions? There, my questions. Hello. Good evening. We're up and running. Different view today, which is actually not a bad view. And Zaya's father looking over my shoulder, keeping an eye on things. Wood stove in the background, doing its keeping me warm. Not quite warm yet. G'day, how you going? So Q&A, we've actually got a few questions today, so that's great. Makes things more interesting, and then we can get a bit of a theme going with those questions. So we have Matt here, and the question's about mulching. It is a non-student, so not doing the course, the online course, but welcome to join if he wants. Okay, so let's see how this question goes. Are there instances when you wouldn't want to apply mulch to the soil, for example, in the rainy season where the soil is very wet most of the time? I feel that we apply mulch pretty much all the time, most of the time. We have mulch on our soil. I was having a discussion with Ben. Ben's helping us out here at the moment today about it. We are in the subtropics here, which leans more towards the tropics than temperate. The ecology, the biology, the life in a cold temperate situation is 60% of the ecology is the biology is under the surface of the soil. So it's in the soil. So you can probably have, I'll elaborate some more. So when you go into the tropics, so this would probably be the wet tropics, the soil life, the life or the whole biology, 90% above the soil, so only 10% in the soil. So if you don't have mulch on that soil, where does the ecology live? Because it doesn't have a habitat to be in. All your soil critters, all your soil critters above, the nematodes would be in the soil. All your bugs and your critters and things that are eating things down and doing all their action. So they're going to be, they need a place to live. And if you've got bare soil, then they've got nowhere to live. It's really easy to work that out. If you go and have two beds side by side and one's got mulch on it, one has not got mulch on it, and then you come back after you put the mulch on 3 weeks later, and then you open up the mulch, you'll see it full of life, absolutely full of life. And you look at the one beside it with no mulch on it, and those species are not there. They don't have a habitat. So you need to have a mulch on your soil. Now, the part of the question that we have to look at is, for example, in the rainy season where the soil is very wet most of the time. So when you're in a very wet scenario, so you're not dry lands, you're opposite of dry lands, that's why we have raised beds. So you raise the bed, then it can have drainage. So it obviously needs to be a good soil, a well-drained soil. So it takes a while to build your soil up, possibly. As an example, when we first come to this property, we had very little topsoil. And so we slowly built the soil up. I didn't buy any soil in. We slowly built the soil up, just kept making compost and kept making compost and kept making compost and adding that compost to it and slowly built that up. We did do some bit of terracing with some rocks and then build that up. So when you got terracing with rock wall, open rock wall, so not a solid brick wall, the moisture can drain out. But you still need a good quality soil to do that. And so you have to build that up. And so we're constantly building our soil so it can well drain. What used to happen when we had 3 weeks of wet weather, we would lose a lot of garden plants. They would just, basically the soil would become deoxygenated, so it's oversaturated, and it become anaerobic, and you'd come out the next day and the plant would just be a mush. It'd just die. But that doesn't happen anymore because we've built the soil up when we say built the soil up, I don't mean in height. Yes, we've done the raised bed, not huge raised bed, but slightly raised bed. But we built up the soil ecology, the soil texture, and got the crumbly soil, which means that you got the gels and the the structure, and it's made naturally so that it stays in crumbles, and that means moisture can flow through. So we not that we had a lot of plants in the garden with this big wet season that we had, but we had uh, we didn't lose many plants in this scenario. That means we've been building our soil, as in the soil structure, the soil life, and obviously the minerals and everything that comes with what we're trying to do with our compost. So you focus mostly on compost and building your soil. In the first few years, you're going to have more losses because your soil isn't being built and become able to handle the moisture. And that's where you go to. Okay. Are there any instances when you wouldn't want to be applying mulch to the soil? So some people say, which might be a reflection of the rainy season, is you're trying to get the air in to dry it out. I don't know that that's really going to do much. I'd rather see the mulch on there, and it's still, the mulch should be free draining. The material should be free draining. It's a loose fibrous organic matter mulch. It should be free draining, and then you need the soil underneath to be draining. So I think that's what we need to focus on. And I've consistently, not always, but my intention is to always have mulch on our soils. For the soil ecology, yes, it stops the sunlight beating down and baking it. That's an absolute given. And our soils have got a high clay content in our topsoil, near our topsoil, and so it cracks severely. So we've got to keep it quite moist. So the more mulch you have on there, the less cracking you have. Once it's cracked, the cracks go down really deep. It's really hard to hydrate that soil up again. It takes a lot of water to get it back. So you try and not have that. So we really do focus on keeping that mulch on. Okay, I've got a bit of a thread going there. So this must be Matt from Vietnam with this question. So g'day, Matt, how are you going? Radio. So Finn, good morning, Finn. You've been chopping down branches from trees. Hopefully you're going to chip that and give yourself some great mulch material. We did a little bit of chipping yesterday. We needed to open up a space to a little coaster van needed to come in, and we needed to get there was a branch too low on the ice cream bean, so we cut that down and then we chipped the material from that. Hugelculture beds, visual barriers, plant the bushes and trees. Otherwise, there's not enough room to make the garden beds later. Visual barriers, plant the. Yeah, you got good chip. Great. Okay, Matt, thanks. You've got the answer to that. Yeah. So now you're tropic in Vietnam. So you need the mulch. You really need the mulch. You're going to have to build you might have waterlogging issues, but a couple of years of keeping good mulch on there, and that is soil ecology makes a good soil. It helps towards that well-drained soil. My practice has been every time we come in and the mulch has gotten a bit thin, if the soil texture is still really nice on top, the compost that we put on previously is still fine, we'll just put more mulch on. But if we find that compost is really not beautiful, you wouldn't want to plant something into it. It just doesn't look appealing. We'll rake back whatever's left of the mulch, the dry, probably oxidized material. We drag it off to the sides, use it as an edge material. We put on a nice layer of compost, because we've always got compost coming on. There's always compost available. We make sure we always have compost coming on. So that's a big focus, is to get that compost. So we put a layer of compost on, and then we put mulch on the top again. And even today, Ben was here, he said, now, how does that look? I said to him when I finished putting the mulch on the bed, we just old straw, grassy stuff that we had sitting there. And he said, "Oh wow, that's really high." I said, "No, that's just perfect. That's just right." He was thought I'd overdone it, but I said, "No, no, that's perfect. That'll settle down and last 3 months. Should last 3 months. So that means you only have to do it 4 times a year. If you put on a real thin layer, the more soil ecology, more ecology you have, the faster that's going to break down, but it's the faster you're building your soil. So that means you have to replace it. So if you only put a thin layer on there, you have to replace it probably within 3 weeks. But if you put a thick layer on it, you'll get several months out of it. So, and of course, as soon as it's gone, weeds are starting to occur. So, and really focus on your edges. People want it thicker on the edges because nature gardens edges. That's where your weeds are going to come in, and you really want to avoid weed chasing weeds. We want to garden and we want to harvest and we want to process the food that we harvest. We don't want to be weeding and weeding and weeding. Weeds, yes, they're bringing in nature's bringing in components that's needed in the weed and in their minerals and also in their action, their mechanical physical action on the soil. But and also nature's putting weeds there as a ground cover because there's no mulch and there's we got a couple of ground cover ones that are a little bit annoying. So if we keep the mulch on, we don't have to worry about those. They're okay, but not much fun to be working with them, and just got no soil ecology on top. It just so yeah, just go with the mulch. Okay, I'm back on that subject again. Just looking at the thread. It's a big habit, Matt, of people not mulching. It's bare soil. Nature abhors bare soil, so it's going to throw whatever it can at that soil to get a cover on it. And living matter, living mulch is fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. It's can you work? Can you still garden? Which means harvest with those living soil covers. That living ground cover. If you can still work with that, fine. But it usually can get quite rampant, and then it gets a little bit tricky to plant and get going again. And get your production. So we go for the mulch. It's more work, um, but so is weeding. so yeah. In the syntropic, we use wood chip in the syntropic. In the garden, we're using grass mulch. So we manage around between the houses and around the property a bit, and also beside the road, we cut the grass. If we're down beside the road, we don't manage the grass alongside the road. The council will spray chemicals, and so we don't want that. So we manage that grass. So we turn that negative into positive, and we use it as a mulch. So we use grass mulch in the garden, but in the syntropics, it's a lot thicker planting, and I really want that material to last quite longer. And we seem to be getting a good result from we use wood chip. So that's what we wood chipped up the ice cream bean the other day, and with other stuff in there as well. A bit of diversity in there is the wood chip. So we really like using the wood chip in the syntropic. Because the wood chip gives you longevity, it gives you a longer period of time before it breaks down. The grass can break down quicker, so you're a little bit quite busy with the syntropic, and rather than a kitchen garden, so you get that longevity with the wood chip, and you'll be getting different fungal activity as well. Just get back to the thread. Yeah, so Finn, yeah, that's right. With the chip, it can look better than so in a food forest scenario where we do the chop and drop. A lot of people really can't handle that. So if you chip it, then it's a mulch. It looks different, and it's probably a bit culturally more acceptable. It's a weird thing. It's a bit of dogma that you don't think that's a great idea to have that sort of material around. We just need to re-educate people and 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 ignore them because you're getting the benefits. You people don't realize the value of every species that's coming in because you've created a habitat that they can be in, and every species brings other species, and so you want, and they'll be because it's more natural. They're going to be the beneficial species. They're not going to be the non-beneficial species. So you're creating a space for nature to work, and that's what I push all the time. Create a space for nature to work, and away you go. It just, you know, I didn't have to think about my soil building itself. I create a space for nature to do it with a little bit of inputs, obviously with the compost, which is all done as natural as I can. Anyhow, species are involved to make that compost. And then we've ended up with a beautiful soil, nice deep soil, well drained, not losing any plants. So we've obviously must be on the right path in that natural path. I can't get this thread finished. Fungi in desert they see as rot because it's so rare and the wild is big enough to see in bare eyes. Okay, so that's an interesting comment you make there about 7 species that follow the one. So I think that's it might be that one species is a major predator, so it's a really quite important species. It has a big impact, and then it brings 7 species with that. How whether so if it's not a major species, like a major predator, it might not bring the 8, but at least it's bringing the couple with it, or 7 or whatever it is. At least there's going to be the opportunity for some to come with it. And I like thinking it the other way. So everyone you refuse to allow into your system, how many species are you not allowing into your system that are beneficial? Because of dogma, say no, I'm not going to use that plant. Like where we have lantana here, and people hate lantana. I don't use lantana. I don't get too upset about lantana, but I find it not very pleasant to work with. But lantana might be bringing 5 or 4 or whatever other species that are beneficial. People just hate lantana because they consider it as a weed. But it makes good soil. So how does it make good soil? It's not, is there a physical thing, or is it the species that come with it that are making the good soil? That's the interesting thing. So when we have this dogma, no, I'm not going to use that species, then you are possibly quite limiting the capacity of your system because you're not allowing those other species to come in. Okay, cool. What's Nikki doing, Zara?
I'm not sure.
She can listen into this if she
wants. She's staying.
She's staying overnight, yeah. But is she
she's probably talking with
the kids, yeah. If she can listen into this if she wants to. So, okay, I'm going to go to the next question. This is great having these questions because it really gives us something to work with. So I much appreciate the questions. And Zaya, did you follow up on that third question? Remember that third question, please. Rightio. So Matt has another one. Living in Vietnam with 2 distinct seasons. For 6 months of the year, it is very hot, dry, and sunny. Then for the other 6, we're slammed with heavy tropical rains. Any tips on how to manage soil through these 2 very different seasons? Or it's probably what we were just talking about is mulch. If you got very heavy rains, you're going to lose topsoil because it's going to wash away. But you have really good mulch layer on there, that soil is protected, and it's the topsoil, which is it's the engine of our garden, is the topsoil. And so we got to protect that from those heavy rains. We had the really big event, so we've had a really wet year this year. I'm not sure if you're up to speed where we're at, and the most rain that we've had in the period of time we've been here 17 years, and it's been, I don't know when it was a record of that amount previously. It was 1.5 meters in, what was it, 1.5 meters in 10 days or something that we had?
No, it was less than 5 days.
5 days we had 1.5 meters of rain. So we had really heavy rains. Luckily or fortunately, not long before that rain, we'd redone quite a lot of garden beds. So we went through whatever garden beds needed mulch on them, or resetting with compost and mulch. You're welcome to listen in if you want to. Yeah. It's just the girls just need to be occupied. That's all.
Oh yes.
Yeah. We hardly lost any garden soil material because they were mulched. We lost paths, so we have raised beds, slightly raised beds, only probably 75 mil, 3 inches, 75 mil raised beds, sort of. That's probably about it. And then the paths are sawdust, where we lost a fair bit of path material, but we didn't lose hardly any of the garden. So there's Nikki in the background there trying to get warm. So that's the benefit there, Matt, to have that in. And then you got 6 months of very hot, dry, and sunny. Well, you need to protect that soil. It's mulch. So it goes back to that first question. It's mulch, mulch, mulch. Okay. We got Bruno from Karoi, because so Karoi's only 20 minutes, 30 minutes drive from here. He's asking about Singapore daisy. Okay, so it's Singapore daisy. I'll finish that subject. Yeah, I think we're pretty right on that, Matt. No worries, you got the answer there. The Singapore daisy. So it's a species that of a ground cover that is very prolific. What the benefit of Singapore daisy is that it is fungal. It will beat grass, not all the grasses. I haven't actually worked with Singapore daisy. I don't have it on my property. Um, it will beat your grasses. Excuse me, and it's a fungal orientated species. So it's really good for starting tree systems, because it's going to change the ecology from bacterial in the grass to fungal for trees. And so there's your benefit from that. So it's not much fun to garden your veggie garden with Singapore daisy, because it's quite rampant, and it breaks up into tiny little bits, and every little bit will grow, and it's pretty full on. So you're trying to avoid having it in your veggie garden, but in your food forest or your tree establishment systems, it's fine. Okay, it's an introduced species to Australia. People don't like that, but nature's using it for a purpose. So if you can work, if you want to work with nature, you're going to work with Singapore daisy. I don't know what happens. As I said, I haven't worked with it myself. I know what it is. I've seen it. I think I've weeded it for someone. Um, I don't know what happens in the long term. So, say 15 years down the track, when you got your food forest established, how it's behaving then. Does it back off? Does it, its job is done and it backs off? I'm not certain on that. So if you can understand that, well, then you just got to be patient, get your system up and flourishing, and then it will back off later. So lantana does the same thing. Lantana beats grass, heavy grass. Lantana will beat heavy grass, and then once the food forest or a timber forest is established, lantana phases out because it can't get the sunlight anymore. So it's a pioneer species for building that system. So Singapore daisy is a ground cover that maybe you could call up into a herbaceous sort of layer, because it climbs on things quite a bit, but yeah, it has a purpose. And interestingly, I saw it in Fiji. We're walking around a property in Fiji, quite a degraded space. It had a lot of pine trees have been planted there and harvested and destroyed and messed up, and really messed up space. A lot of topsoil missing. And there was actually a track, sort of half graded track, where they must have taken logs out or something or other. So it was actually quite not fertile, considering we're in Fiji. Well exposed area, up high, so really very well damaged, and had a lot of heavy rain and stuff taken all away. And one of the guys on the site there, he said, "Oh, have a look at this. See the Singapore daisy here." And you lift that, you lifted it up, and underneath it was moist as, where you come 1 meter away, where it was a bit exposed and it was dry. They hadn't had any rain, so it could rain, and it was dry. So the Singapore daisy's holding the moisture there. So it's your pioneer to build that system, and it's quite fertile underneath the Singapore daisy, because even though they're quite rampant and grow, there's a lot of leaf material that would be rotting and dying, and so it's cycling energy and building the soil. So if you want to build soil, use it. Jeff Lawton uses it a lot. He's introduced it into, I look in the video the other day, he's introduced it into Jordan to build the soil in Jordan. And it's a great ground cover. It's doing its job, so I think there's locations that it's fine to use, and it's not ideal in your veggie garden, because it's going to be very hard it'll be very competitive in your veggie garden, and you won't be able to find your plants. So yeah, approach it in that way, if that's been any help to you. No, sorry, it's not Bill. It's Zaya's father in the painting behind me. Yeah, as soon as I turned the screen, I thought, "Oh, that's going to get a comment." He's keeping an eye on me, making sure I'm behaving myself. Okay, covered that one. We're going to go to the third question now. Zaya, did you follow up on that third question?
Well, I'm not entirely sure what I need to follow up on. So
Okay, so this is. So I'll throw questions at you. So you're listening in.
yeah.
So this is from Tendong, and Tendong has been communicating with me on Messenger. So I'll just get into there and just remind myself
Is it Africa?
in Africa, but I can't remember if he's told me which country in Africa.
Yeah.
Just check that. Yeah, so Tendong is in Africa. So he's just giving us some questions here. So we'll just have to work our way through that. I'm just not quite sure. Obviously, English is not the first language. So I just got to try and decipher some of the questions here. So, Brother Tom, thanks for the opportunity. I would love to ask. What happened is he connected through me through Messenger or through Facebook, and then just connected, and I said good day or whatever, and then I put him onto our website, and he's obviously found the Q&A, so he's thrown in a question. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember something. Just quickly run through some of the things but yeah. Okay. How can we include entrepreneurship in our permaculture design? So, I think to say commercial, would you say that's
Yeah, a business.
a business?
Yeah.
So it's a good question. What Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton have suggested or said what to do is get your own house in order first. So create your own food. That is your first priority. You need to become resilient and create your own food, to grow your own food. That's the first thing you do. And while you're doing that, you learn what you're good at, or your soil or ecology or culture or region is good at growing. And if you enjoy that, then scale it up, and there's your economy from there. So that's the first thing you need to do. So don't come into a property and say we're going to grow this because that's what you make good money at, because the next state or whatever, they're making good money, or the next region or next valley or the next village or whatever, they're making good money out of this, so we're going to do the same thing, because it might not be the ideal species for you to grow. So grow your own food, and then the certain, and also I'm going to say is don't focus on one species. You want to have several species. So the 5 or 4 or 6 or whatever plants that you grow very easily without a lot of work and a lot of need, you might put a bit more work in if it is more valuable, as in price wise and at the market, and because you need diversity. Any system is going to need diversity. So your financial system, your economy, is going to need diversity as well. So for stability, and your system, the ecology wants diversity for it to function, so you can have a natural building soil, and so you need those species in there. Okay, so once you've worked out what grows very easily or easier for you, then if you can find a market for that, or create a market for that, or create a value add that into some jams or dehydration or whatever it might be for that product, if you need to, and then that's your market. That's what we need to do. That's I think we all need to do that. Now you can do education as well. However, there's a lot of education sites, and not all of us are great educators, or can attract enough students to get an economy out of it. If you do, and you can, we'll go that way, but don't rely on that. Remember, diversity. So we focused here, possibly a bit of a mistake, but we focused here on the education side of it. But the one thing we were doing is always working on the property's fertility system, and now we can grow food. Initially, we wouldn't have been able to grow food here because it just didn't have the fertility. It was a very damaged landscape, and so there was very little topsoil, very little fertility, and no fertility system. So we created a fertility system with the animals mostly. Now we're moving more into biomass. So we got the wood chip because we got the biomass. We got a lot of material that's quite prolific, and we can chip that and get. So that's another part of our fertility system. But the main part of it is the animals, which is the cow and their manure, and the goats and the chooks. That's our main fertility system, and they're integrated, and that's giving us diversity. And from that, we're getting a good result. I'll just jump on the thread. So thank you. We've got another comment here, so that's really good. Growing your own food is by far the biggest deal, in my opinion, on providing benefit to your life. The clarity you get from eating nutritional foods you produce is unmatched. I totally agree with you. Thank you for your comment. That's a brilliant comment, and absolutely right. And you also, I think you're grounded. A lot of people in their heads, I'm going into a different tangent now, but a lot of people in their heads and have lots of ideas and they're bouncing all over the place. When you in your garden and you're growing your food and you're with your system and you're in a system because you've allowed a system. If you've got a monoculture space, it's not a good system. It is a very it's not balanced. It's not diverse system. So you need a diverse system. So you get that polyculture in there, get that system happening, and then you are in nature. You are working with nature. So you must be in nature, even though we're having a big feel on that. And hopefully we're always learning to be a bit more natural each season, because we get feedback with our seasons of what we're doing and what's happening. So you become that, and then you're grounded, and then you can make some really it's a better state to be in than bouncing all over the place and in your head too much. So it's just a comment that I like to make. And then they're getting the quality and the health from that. That's where we need to be. That's really for sure. Rightio. So where am I at to now? Number two. What is the difference between sustainable farming and regenerative farming? In Bill's opinion and Jeff Lawton's opinion and in my opinion, it's the same thing. People are having a little bit of trouble with the word sustainable. I don't have any trouble with the word sustainable. What's happening with the people with the word sustainable is they think that we mean we're going to sustain what we're doing. No, sustainable system creates more energy than it consumes, which is a regenerative system. So we don't intend to sustain what has been happening. We are changing to a sustainable system. And so they're just getting stuck on that sustain part of the word. I don't care if they need to use the word regenerative. I know what'll happen in 10 or 15 years' time. People will say, everyone's using the word regenerative. They're not being regenerative. We're going to have to find another word. If that's what they need to do, that's what they need to do. All I know is we just need to do practices that are forever life, so living forever. And to do that, we have to build the system, which is the way we use the word sustainable, is we create more energy than we consume. A sustainable system creates more energy than it consumes. That's sustainable. So if it means your soil is better than before you planted the crop. So after you harvest the crop, it's better than when you planted it. And that's what regenerative is trying to do. That's their intent. And that's what we've been doing with sustainable permaculture for 17 years on this place. And so I would say we're sustainable. I didn't need that word regenerative word 17 years ago to build our system so that it's making its own fertility. And it was a permaculture design. So and in permaculture design, we use the word sustainable. So they're the same thing. People just get a little bit hung up on certain words, or they think, people think permaculture is all about gardening. It's been there, done that, didn't save the world. So regenerative and agriculture is going to save the world. So, but it's not the word that's going to save the world. It's how you perform, how you behave, what you do. And every time we have our ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share, and in that, we are making sure that we are not depleting our soil or our system. So we had a major rain event, we lost a lot of topsoil, but my system is still okay. It's not destroyed. It's not totally damaged because of that big rain event. And that's interesting. A lot of our ecology in our soil would have drowned because it was so wet, so things went anaerobic, and a lot of materials come out. But I don't think we've gone back 17 years. We might have gone back a season or half a season maybe, but I'm not that concerned because the whole system is still growing, and so it's going to catch up pretty quick. I'll make some changes so that I don't lose some of that organic matter next time, which is, that's in the plans. It's there, the design's there. Just need a bit of time and things to dry out a little bit to get to it, and so that it doesn't occur again. It could have been a lot worse if I didn't have such a good design. Most people don't see that it's just running down the center of the valley of the property and leaving the property. They don't see that they've lost a whole heap of energy from their system. Right, I've got a bit of a thread now.
Just jump in on the
Zai's jumping in.
I think a lot of people, because the word sustainable has been bastardized and used in instances where things aren't truly sustainable because they're actually not producing more energy than what they consume. This is where the people get confused with the word sustainable, because they feel that it's, when you're sustainable, you can just sort of keep going the same. Yeah, the same. But that's not really sustainable. Wasn't it Bill Mollison who was it who said that the only truly sustainable system on the planet is a forest?
Nature.
Yeah.
Nature. Yeah. Humans aren't sustainable because we want machines, and we want to have light at night without burning a candle. That a candle's sustainable. You can make your own candles out of property material and have light, but with electric light bulbs you can't. Where's that material? That's not coming from this property. So we're unsustainable because we choose to have some creature comforts that we don't really need. We can survive without, and we want to be on the internet and talk around the world and jump in airplanes. We're not sustainable. So there's consequences from that.
There's a comment there.
Yeah, that's from Markman. I'm not sure. I need a name for Markman. I don't know who that is. Do you know?
That's okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time. How many people are really truly interested and willing to go against the grain and use different methods. It's actually not in Australia here. It's not that hard. Sorry, I just got to jump back on that thread. I got lost. Yeah, okay. It's not that hard now to do the no chemical thing or whatever. It's quite mainstreamy now. And what'll happen is, because the people that are going regenerative, they're using less inputs there, and they're still going to get the in, maybe not immediately, but soon they're going to get better production because their systems are becoming more fertile because of the management, the regenerative grazing methods and things like that, which is what's happening in our fields. I got a field there. I was talking with Nikki yesterday that I got 3 days with the cattle, and I've got more cattle now than I had back then out of that paddock, and now I'm getting something like 5 and 5 is 10, 13 or 14 days out of that paddock, and I was only used to get 3. What have I done is I've just managed my cattle, and they've repaired it. I haven't planted anything. I haven't cultivated anything. I haven't used any fossil fuels. I've used electric fence tape is all I've used, and moved the cattle daily and in a whole routine. And that grass there is amazing. She said, look at this grass. And I said, yeah, well, the cows have made that happen, because they're the biological resources, and it's timing and management. We time and manage when they go back in there, and it's a better thing. So yeah, am I getting off thread? Maybe not.
Yeah, just a little quick comment on the comment on YouTube there.
Yep.
On the chat.
Markman,
yes, it is going to be an interesting to see how people are actually, or how many people are actually going to take this on and start producing their own food. I think when the pandemic hit, a lot of people started buying seed And I think a lot of people got disillusioned because they discovered that, they can't just throw seed in the ground and things come up. They actually have to look at fertility systems and all that sort of thing, and they don't have that knowledge and they don't have the experience. So this is where information like this, freely available online, is really, really vital for people to actually look at and to understand that there is a process involved, and that you can't just think that you can buy a few seeds and chuck them in the ground and you'll have your dinner the next day.
Because they wouldn't have had a compost system in place to put into that soil. So the other thing they would have bought when they bought the seeds is a bag of potting mix.
Yeah.
We've never bought a bag of potting mix for this property in 17 years. We make our own potting mix. Where from? Our compost. And we buy sand to mix with the compost. We don't have sand available in this valley. But we buy sand to mix in our compost and to make our potting mix or our transplant mix. I know sand is that's a finite resource too. It is being replaced, but not at the speed that the world is consuming it, because a lot of people, or too many people, making concrete when they don't need to be making concrete. Let's go back to this thread here. The lower imports are starting to become more popular in my area. The prices of fertilizer, pesticide, primarily because it costs so much to apply and the profits are minuscule. That's right. So what's happened is the pesticides and the chemical fertilizers have gotten more and more expensive because they want to make more and more money at it. So the edge of profitability is getting really, really tight. So the net return is getting really, really tight. And then once there's a bit of a problem occur, it gets too much. So you've got fuel costs and chemical costs, and a lot of people, hopefully, they've got time to transition out and go the regenerative way, because you can have a loss in productivity or your net return in the transition phase, depending on how addicted your system was to those synthetics. And hopefully, you can transition out quick enough so that you can get into the regenerative and not need those outside inputs, which are actually toxic and pushing you further and further away from the natural system. And we started this conversation with trying to be in the natural system, because nature will work with you. So once you go into the synthetics, you're going away from nature. So you're fighting nature, and so it's a hard. You're fighting nature. Your soils are depleting. Your organic matters content is going down because the nitrogen is consuming your organic matter. The nitrogen assists in your organic matter to be consumed by the bacteria. It stimulates the bacteria to chew up the organic matter. So you're getting less and less carbon in your soil, and then you've got less water holding capacity. So you're just going down a downward spiral. So you want to get back into the regenerative, get away from those synthetics, and then you'll be right. And food's been grown for eons. It's just lately it's getting hard. Now that leads into this next question from Kendall. Looking at the importance of growing organic food and also the fast growing world population, especially here in sub-Saharan Africa, how possible is organic farming able to feed this growing population? So what's going to need to be done is there's more food grown on the planet in small land holdings than there is in large land holdings. People don't understand that. It's a stat that's been kicking around for a very long time that 40% of Russian food comes from backyards. I'm not sure how accurate that is in Russia, but worldwide, most food is coming from plots of 5 acres and less. We need more people to be growing organic food on 5 acres and less. And you're not only going to be able to grow your vegetables, you're actually going to grow your protein, because you will have animal systems to build your fertility. Nature uses animal systems in building naturally in a forest, which is a sustainable system. If we leave it alone, a forest creates more energy than it consumes. If we leave it alone, we can stimulate a little bit if we know what we're doing, but if we leave it alone, it's going to do it in some form. And it's, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but it's building, and that's what we need to mimic. Rightio.
I think the hardest thing is the transition phase from chemical farming to organic farming. because people will lose productivity in the beginning. And so that is probably something that scares a lot of people off.
It's quite common to lose productivity. Not everyone loses productivity. You might use some. So there is guys that can have information to help you through that. We have a local person here called Graham Sate with his company called Nutritech. He knows how to wean you off it. So basically, you still use a little bit of the synthetics, and you use less and less over a series of 2 or 3 years or seasons or whatever it might need to be, depending on the situation. And so you'll still get your product, most of your productivity. Maybe you lose a little bit, maybe you'll gain some people have transitioned and got more productivity immediately. I, in my Western Australian circumstance, didn't. Our soil was really degraded there, and it was a semi-arid situation, which I wasn't aware of at the time I was there. But it was on the cusp. It's so sad that I sold the property because it was on the cusp of actually moving into its natural state and would have been very productive. But yeah, this transition can be challenging. So your soil needs to transition, your soil ecology, I should say, needs to transition, but your head needs to transition as well, because you've got to start thinking differently. And you'll have a policy of you when using synthetics of what can you kill today, because you've got pests and diseases. Once you get into the regenerative, natural, sustainable permaculture, whatever it might be called, it's what can I keep alive, or what can I make live today, not what I can kill. You focus on what you want, not what you don't want, and away you go. So you lose too much energy in focusing on what you don't want, and you just leave it, forget about it, and let nature sort it out, and let the natural system sort it out. And it does happen. We have to have complete faith in nature. So, and that's hard. People don't have that. Oh no, you got to get rid of this weed. You got to get rid of this weed, like the Singapore daisy comment previously. Don't focus on the Singapore daisy. Focus on what you want, what you need, and the system will sort it out. Don't worry about lantana, because it's going to help you build a food forest. You can spend all your life killing lantana, but it'll help trees grow. So you can assist it to speed it up. You can accelerate it if you want to know what you're doing. Okay, there was another comment there, I think.
Two comments.
Organic materials was 0.6 average, and took a sample from the forest 100 yards away. It was 23% organic matter. So there you go. So corn bean rotation fields for the last 20 years. Wow. There you go. Crazy how much organic material is lost with the conventional agriculture. Of course, my comment before. So when we make compost, you think of the nitrogen and the carbon ratios, and it's really important to get the carbon and nitrogen ratios to get the compost to occur in a hot compost. It's not critical, but it's how we assess how we're doing. What we're doing is we're getting the carbon nitrogen ratio. So when you go and put on a whole pile of synthetic nitrogen, it's going to stimulate the bacteria, which is what's happening in your hot compost. Is the bacteria are reacting with the carbon and the nitrogen and creating, which stimulates and it gets it decomposing faster. So when you go and put on synthetic nitrogen, which is way off the scale of what the soil needs, because a lot of it's just going to turn back into the air anyhow, because it's not naturally put into the soil. And so you put on lots, it stimulates the bacteria to eat up your organic matter, because there's your carbon and your nitrogen component happening. You put on too much nitrogen, it's going to eat the carbon to try and balance that out. And so then you're losing all your organic matter. So when you do it naturally, you can't overdo it with the nitrogen. It's in plant living. You can have a whole heap of stand of wattles, and there'll be a tree amongst the wattles, and it's doing fine. A climax species in the wattle tree is a nitrogen fixer. Nature can't. It won't give it too much nitrogen. It's just balanced. And when we put on the synthetics, we just more is better, and it's killing the soil. It's with that example that was just put up there is exactly right. Crazy how much organic material is lost in the conventional agriculture when the natural way is by far better and more profitable and less inputs. Absolutely, I totally agree. Okay, going back to that question here is how possible is organic farm able to feed more? So you're going to have more people growing it on smaller plots that's how we're going to do it. And what's going to happen is that you're going to have more village people, then you're going to have more smaller communities. Instead of having these huge farms with only 2 or 3 people running these huge farms, there's no community there. And there's no diversity, there's no multi-species there. It's a degrading system. You get into smaller plots, more people growing it in backyards and small spaces and 5-acre plots and things like that. And then you have more people involved, you have more community involved, and people aren't chasing the dollar so much in a community like that because everyone's helping each other out. And so it's not driven by money, it's driven by community and care. And you go and you'll fall back into care of people, care of earth, and fair share. Whereas you go into the monoculture, and which is a linear thinking, and it's all about greed. And so that's how we're going to do it. And it's going to be a more fun place to be in. I'll go to the next question.
That's the same question. It's just the fourth.
The fourth one. No, a question. I'm currently trying to write my permaculture this is the project proposal, but I'm not really a good writer, but I have the full vision in my head of what I want to do, and it will include entrepreneurship. I need to do some fundraising, and there need to be proposals down on paper. Please, can you help or connect to opportunities where I can find a sample template of a permaculture proposal?
Okay. Now, I've done a bit of a search on Google. So if you Google sample template for a permaculture proposal, there are a number of little plans and other things that come up. So I think that it would be a best idea to just Google that. I will put the phrase in the comments.
Yep.
And it'll come up with, you'll have to sort through what is suited to you, because there's a number of ways you can put a permaculture proposal together, and it just means that you have to just have a look at what is out there and either use one that's already existing or actually pull different ideas from different ones.
Okay, thanks, Sire. Okay, so Tendong, hopefully you get that info. And I still haven't looked at all your thread on the messenger, so I might have a look on there and have some more comments for that. So I might send you some more comments as well. So best of luck with that, and let's keep communicating. And great to have you on the questions today, and also talking to you on Messenger. Okay, so that's really good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the questions and the comments. That's really interesting, and makes it much easier to have a chat when I've got some questions, because it gets a thread going, and conversation going, and we can all help each other out with that. So been very pleasurable.
Now, we do these live Q&As every Wednesday, the same time, from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time.
Join in,
put questions in before then.
You can send questions in before, and also obviously on the chat. And excellent.
You can ask your questions on the homepage of our website or on any other page on the sidebar.
And what have we been doing this week? Well, you can see by the jumper and me near the fire, we've cooled down. So that's going to be, we planted some seedlings which got smashed, not smashed, but they just couldn't handle the extra wet. They were a little bit vulnerable plants when we planted them out, and then they were going fine for 3 days, and then we just got wet. So we've lost a few of them, but what we've noticed is quite a bit of insect activity. So it's just sort of the start. It usually happens at the start of we're a bit late this year on our growing seasons getting away. Even in self-sown stuff is only just sort of happening. So we're a little bit late with that. So the season's a bit later. So with this cold weather coming in, hopefully those insects will phase out, and we can get kicking. We did a big planting yesterday. Was it yesterday? Day before. And got another lot going. So the Syntropics is up and going. So that's been the main thing. Bit of chop and drop occurring still, accumulating some biomass for wood chip for putting on the garden beds. And so it's we're just plugging away here, and things are looking good. And so we haven't had rain for 4 days, I think it is. So So
Woohoo.
yeah, hopefully we get some more weather like this, a bit of sunshine. It's still been a little bit cloudy. We need some really good sunshine to get things cranking, and it's not so muddy with the mud's phased out, and so yeah, interesting. But they are saying we're going to get more rain. I don't know how far away, but we're going to get more rain somewhere along the track. So we'll make the best while we can, and see how we go. So you take care, everyone, and nice to chat, and it's been a good one today. So appreciate that, and we'll catch up next week. Take care, everyone.